Hello there, my sleepy citizens. Tonight, we journey into the shadowed streets of Gotham City, where mysteries lurk and the Dark Knight stands vigilant against the forces of chaos. We bring you tales of Batman, uncovering different sides of the man behind the mask. And as our journey through these stories winds down, a calm ambience of Gotham's streets will carry you throughout the night, bringing you to restful sleep without interruptions from any ads. If you enjoy these tales, please be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. But for now, let's get cozy and step into the world of Gotham. Rain fell in steady whispers against the cobblestones of the Narrows, each droplet finding its way between ancient stones that had weathered more than a century of Gotham's secrets. Batman moved through the narrow alleyways like a shadow given form, his cape collecting moisture from the perpetual mist that seemed to rise from the very foundations of this forgotten district. Here, where Gotham's oldest buildings leaned against each other for support, the city showed its true age. Weathered brick, iron fire escapes that groaned in the wind, and gas lamps that flickered with uncertain light. The Narrows had always been different from the rest of Gotham. While other districts had embraced modernity with varying degrees of success, this maze of interconnected streets and hidden courtyards remained stubbornly rooted in the past. Steam rose from manholes like incense, and the sound of water moving through unseen channels created a constant, almost musical backdrop to the night's investigation. "Master Bruce?" Alfred's voice came softly through the cow's communication system. "Dr. Tompkins has confirmed 3 more cases at the clinic. The symptoms remain consistent: high fever, delirium, and that peculiar sensitivity to light. Most concerning of all, each patient speaks of hearing voices calling to them from below ground." Batman paused beneath a flickering gas lamp, rainwater running off his cape in steady streams. The lamp's yellow glow cast dancing shadows on the wet cobblestones, creating patterns that seemed to shift and move with each gust of wind. Any connection between the victims? All residents of the Narrows, all discovered near storm drain entrances or abandoned subway grates. Dr. Tompkins notes that several mentioned following the sound of children laughing, though no children were found in the vicinity of their collapse. The sound of his own footsteps on wet stone was muffled by the constant background symphony of dripping water, distant steam pipes, and the occasional skitter of small creatures moving through shadow. The Narrows had always been home to Gotham's forgotten, those who found safety in the district's maze-like layout and relative isolation from the city's more violent neighborhoods. Batman approached the latest incident site, where yellow police tape fluttered like prayer flags around a storm drain entrance. The grate had been pulled aside, leaving a dark opening that seemed to breathe with the city's hidden circulation system. Detective Harvey Bullock's investigation notes, shared through Oracle's network, described the scene. An elderly man found unconscious, muttering about rats the size of children, and voices that promised safety below. The grate was opened from the inside, Batman observed, examining the twisted metal. The iron bars were old but strong. It would have taken considerable force or specific tools to bend them out. More interesting were the scratch marks on the surrounding stonework, patterns that suggested claws rather than conventional tools. Alfred's voice carried a note of concern through the gentle static of the communication system. "I've been researching the historical records as you requested. The Narrows sits atop Gotham's original sewer system, built in the 1800s by a man named Otis Flanagan. The city records show his work was exemplary, but there are gaps in the documentation. Entire sections of the underground network that were sealed and forgotten after a series of incidents. Batman's enhanced vision analyzed the scratch marks, finding patterns that were disturbingly organic. The gouges in the stone were too regular to be random, too purposeful to be accidental damage. Disappearances, primarily. Workers who went into the tunnels and never returned. The official reports blame cave-ins and flooding, but there are unofficial accounts. Stories of a man who claimed dominion over the spaces beneath the city. The workers called him the Rat Catcher, though his real name appears to have been erased from most records. A soft sound echoed from the storm drain. Not quite human, not quite animal. Batman positioned himself near the opening, listening to the complex acoustics of the underground system. Water moved through multiple channels, creating layers of sound that could easily mask footsteps or voices. But beneath the water's music, something else moved with purpose and intelligence. "I'm going down," he said quietly, activating the cowl's enhanced audio systems. "Monitor my position and maintain communication. If these tunnels are as extensive as the records suggest, you could become lost for days," Alfred finished. "I shall maintain constant contact and guide you through the historical maps as needed. Master Bruce, be careful. The records speak of a man who spent so long below ground that he forgot how to live in the light." Batman lowered himself through the storm drain entrance, his boots finding purchase on rungs that were slick with decades of moisture. The air below was thick and warm, carrying scents of rust, decay, and something organic that might have been compost or might have been something less pleasant. His cowl's filtration system engaged automatically, protecting him from potential pathogens while allowing him to analyze the atmospheric composition. The tunnels stretched in both directions, disappearing into darkness that his enhanced vision could penetrate only partially. The walls were lined with brick that had been laid with obvious craftsmanship. Whoever had built these passages had intended them to last. Iron pipes ran along the ceiling, some still functional, others corroded into lace-like patterns that created complex shadows in his cowl's display. The original blueprints show this tunnel connecting to a central hub approximately 200 meters to your east, Alfred reported, his voice maintaining its calm, reassuring tone despite the circumstances. However, the sealed sections I mentioned appear to branch off from that hub. If someone has been living down there, they'd have access to a significant portion of the city. Batman agreed, moving carefully along the tunnel. His footsteps were silent, but the water dripping from above created a natural rhythm that could mask other sounds. Every few meters he paused to listen, analyzing the audio patterns for anything that didn't belong to the normal functioning of the underground system. The tunnel walls showed signs of modification, openings that didn't appear on any official blueprint, passages that had been carved or expanded by hand. Some were barely large enough for a child to crawl through, others wide enough for adults. The pattern suggested a network within the network, a secondary system designed by someone who understood the infrastructure intimately. A soft chittering sound echoed from somewhere ahead, followed by the patter of small feet moving quickly across stone. Batman froze, letting his enhanced hearing analyze the sound. Multiple creatures, moving in coordination rather than random scurrying. The acoustic signature suggested rats, but their behavior was unusually organized. "Alfred, the records you found about the original builder, what happened to him?" Otis Flanagan disappeared in 1887, shortly after the tunnel system was completed. The official report states he fell into one of his own construction sites, but witnesses claimed he had been acting strangely for months. He spoke of hearing voices in the tunnels, claimed the rats were trying to communicate with him. His fellow workers believed he had been affected by some form of gas leak or toxic exposure. Batman continued forward, noting how the tunnel began to widen as he approached what the blueprints indicated was the central hub. The air carried new scents now, not just decay and moisture, but cooking food, wood smoke, and the indefinable smell of human habitation. Someone was indeed living down here, and they had been for some time. The hub opened before him like a cathedral of brick and iron. The space was vast, with tunnels branching off in 8 directions like the spokes of a wheel. Gas lamps had been installed at regular intervals, their flames providing warm, flickering light that created constantly shifting patterns on the curved walls. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Whoever had built this space had possessed both engineering skill and an artist's eye for proportion and beauty. But it was the modifications that caught Batman's attention. Platforms had been built along the walls, connected by rope bridges and narrow walkways. Gardens of mushrooms grew in carefully tended beds, their pale caps glowing faintly in the gaslight. And everywhere, moving through the shadows with purposeful grace, were rats. Not the diseased, desperate creatures one might expect in a sewer, but sleek, healthy animals that moved with obvious intelligence. They carried small objects between their teeth, bits of metal, fragments of cloth, pieces of food. They were building something, or maintaining something, with the organized efficiency of a construction crew. Remarkable, a voice said from the shadows above. Most visitors don't make it this far without invitation. Batman looked up to see a figure perched on one of the elevated platforms, a man of indeterminate age, dressed in clothes that might once have been elegant, but had been patched and modified for underground living. His hair was long and unkempt, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. Around him, dozens of rats sat in perfect stillness, watching Batman with expressions that seemed almost thoughtful. "You must be the one they call Batman," the man continued, climbing down to the hub's main floor with surprising agility. "I am Otis Flanagan, though most surface dwellers have forgotten that name. Down here I am simply the Ratcatcher." "You're supposed to be dead," Batman said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustically perfect space. "The records show you disappeared over a century ago." Flanagan's laugh echoed off the curved walls, creating harmonics that seemed to resonate with the hub's natural frequency. "Time moves differently down here. The city above changes, but these tunnels remain constant. I built them to last, and they have become more than I ever imagined possible." Batman studied the man carefully. Despite claiming to be over 100 years old, Flanagan appeared to be perhaps 60, weathered but vigorous. His movements were precise, economical, and his rats responded to gestures so subtle they were nearly invisible. "The people above are getting sick," Batman said. "The symptoms suggest some form of infection, possibly transmitted through contact with contaminated water or air from the sewer system." "Sick?" Flanagan's expression shifted, showing genuine concern. "That was never the intention. We have been calling to them, yes, inviting those who are lost to find sanctuary below, but harm them? Never." He gestured, and several rats approached, carrying what appeared to be a leather-bound journal. Flanagan accepted it carefully, treating the book with obvious reverence. "I have maintained records of everyone who has joined our community. Each came willingly, seeking refuge from the hardships above." Batman accepted the journal, his cowl's systems analyzing the pages as he flipped through them. The entries were detailed, written in a clear hand that showed no signs of mental deterioration. Names, dates, circumstances that had brought each person to the underground community. The most recent entries described people who were desperate, hungry, or fleeing violence, exactly the kind of individuals who might be tempted by promises of safety and food. "These people," Batman said, indicating the journal, "the surface world believes they're missing. Their families are looking for them." Flanagan's rats had begun moving in complex patterns around the hub, carrying messages between the various tunnel entrances. Their behavior was clearly communicative, though the exact meaning remained opaque to an outside observer. Many had no families, Flanagan replied sadly. The forgotten ones, the discarded ones. We offered them purpose, community, a chance to contribute to something meaningful. He gestured toward the elevated platforms, where Batman could now see faces peering out of what appeared to be comfortable living spaces. But if some came here while ill, if they brought sickness with them, Alfred, Batman subvocalized, are you getting this conversation? Yes, Master Bruce, I'm cross-referencing the names in that journal with missing persons reports. Several matches already, but you're right. Many of these individuals were homeless or estranged from family, people whose disappearances might not have been immediately noticed. Flanagan was studying Batman with obvious curiosity. You protect the surface world, but do you understand it? The way it discards those who cannot keep pace, who lack the resources or connections to maintain their place in society. Down here, everyone has value. Everyone contributes according to their abilities. Batman looked around the hub again, seeing it with fresh perspective. The modifications weren't random or desperate. They represented years of careful planning and construction. The air filtration system that used carefully positioned plants and minerals. The waste management that recycled everything useful. The communication network that relied on trained animals rather than technology that could fail or be monitored. It's impressive, he admitted, but people above ground are getting sick, and at least some of them were infected after contact with your community. We need to find the source of the contamination. A small figure emerged from one of the tunnel entrances, a girl of perhaps 10 years old, moving with the same confident ease as Flanagan himself. She was clean and well fed, wearing clothes that had been carefully mended and adjusted for underground living. Mr. Otis, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the acoustic space. The new ones are asking about their families again. Should I bring them to talk to you? Flanagan's expression softened as he turned to the child. Of course, Sarah, and perhaps they would benefit from speaking with our visitor as well. He looked back at Batman. Sarah came to us 6 months ago, after her grandmother passed and no relatives could be found to care for her. She has become one of our most skilled tunnel guides. Batman knelt to Sarah's eye level, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. Sarah, some of the people who've come down here recently brought a sickness with them. We need to help them get better, but we also need to make sure this sickness doesn't spread to others. The girl's expression was serious beyond her years. The coughing ones, Mr. Otis has been keeping them separate in the old quarantine chambers, but they keep talking about going back up to find their friends. Show me, Batman requested gently. Sarah looked to Flanagan, who nodded approval. She led them through one of the smaller tunnels, her movements sure despite the dim lighting. This passage was older than the main hub, built with different techniques and materials. The walls were lined with small chambers, each sealed with heavy doors that could be opened from the outside. The original builders included these spaces for medical isolation, Flanagan explained as they walked. Cholera outbreaks were common when the tunnels were first constructed. I've maintained them according to the original specifications. They reached a chamber where soft voices could be heard through the thick door. Sarah produced a large iron key, unlocking the space to reveal a surprisingly comfortable room where 3 people sat around a small table. All showed signs of the illness Batman had been investigating. Fever, pale skin, and an obvious sensitivity to even the dim light from the corridor. These are our newest residents, Flanagan said softly. Eban arrived 4 days ago, already showing symptoms. We've been caring for them as best we can, but their condition hasn't improved. Batman activated his Cal's medical scanners, analyzing the patients from a safe distance. The readings were concerning. Elevated temperature, unusual brain activity patterns, and signs of a parasitic infection that didn't match any known pathogen in his databases. Alfred, I'm uploading medical data now. These symptoms don't match anything in our files. Receiving the data now, Master Bruce. I'll contact Dr. Tompkins immediately and begin cross-referencing with historical medical records. Given the age of these tunnels, we might be dealing with something that hasn't been seen in decades. One of the patients looked up as Batman approached, her eyes reflecting the light strangely. You're the one they told us about. The Protector. Are you here to take us back to the cold? I'm here to help, Batman replied gently. But I need to understand what happened to you. How did you first become ill? The voices, another patient said, his words slurred by fever. They promised warmth, safety, food. We followed them down through the old subway entrance on Mercy Street. But the voices, they weren't human voices. Sarah tugged at Batman's cape, drawing his attention. They're not the first ones to talk about voices. Others have mentioned hearing children calling to them or seeing lights in the storm drains. But we don't make those sounds. We don't call people that way. Flanagan's expression had become troubled. If something else is drawing people to the tunnels, something that isn't part of our community. A new sound echoed through the passages. Not the organized chittering of Flanagan's rats, but something wilder, more chaotic. It seemed to come from deeper in the tunnel system, from directions that weren't shown on any of the blueprints Alfred had provided. The sealed sections, Batman realized. Something is living in the parts of the tunnel system that were officially abandoned. Master Bruce? Alfred's voice carried new urgency. Dr. Tompkins has identified the pathogen. It's a parasitic organism that was thought to be extinct, last documented in Gotham during the 1880 AS. The historical records describe it as transmitted through contact with infected animals, particularly rodents. But the concerning part is that it doesn't just cause physical symptoms. Advanced stages include auditory hallucinations and an irresistible compulsion to seek dark, enclosed spaces. The pieces were beginning to form a pattern. Something in the abandoned sections of the tunnel system was infected with this historical pathogen. It was using some form of mimicry to lure people underground, where they became infected and were driven deeper into the tunnels by the parasite's influence on their behavior. We need to find the source, Batman said to Flanagan. The sealed sections you mentioned, how extensive are they? I don't know, the rat-catcher admitted. When I first explored these tunnels over a century ago, those sections were already sealed. The workers who told me about them claimed they were flooded or had suffered structural collapse. But if something is living down there... Sarah stepped forward, her young voice carrying surprising authority. I know a way. There's a passage behind the mushroom gardens that connects to the old system. It's too narrow for adults, but I've been through it. There's something down there, something that doesn't belong. Batman knelt beside her again. Sarah, I need you to show me the entrance, but I don't want you to go down there with me. If there's something dangerous... I'm not afraid, she said simply. This is my home now. These are my people. If something is threatening them, I want to help stop it. Flanagan placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. She knows these tunnels better than anyone, even myself. If you're going to navigate the sealed sections, you'll need a guide who understands how they connect to the rest of the system. Batman considered the options. The girl was clearly brave and knowledgeable, and her size would be an advantage in the narrow passages she'd described. But bringing a child into potential danger went against every instinct he possessed. There's another way, Alfred's voice suggested through the cowl. The historical records include detailed maps of the sealed sections. I can guide Master Bruce through the passages using the original blueprints, updated with the structural modifications Sarah describes. Sarah shook her head firmly. The maps don't show everything. When the builders sealed those tunnels, they changed things, blocked some passages, opened others, without someone who's actually been through them. A new sound interrupted their discussion, a high, keening cry that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. It was followed by the scratch of claws on stone, but magnified, as if the source was much larger than the rats they'd been observing. "That's not one of ours," Flanagan said, his voice tight with concern. His rats had begun moving in agitated patterns, clustering closer to their human companions as if seeking protection. "The sound is coming from multiple directions," Batman observed, his cowl's audio systems analyzing the acoustic patterns. "Whatever's making it, there's more than one, and they're coordinating their movements." Sarah looked up at Batman with determined eyes. "They're getting closer to the main community areas. If we don't stop them now, they'll reach the living spaces, the quarantine chambers. Everyone will be in danger." The logic was inescapable. Batman needed to reach the source of the infection, and Sarah represented his best chance of navigating the abandoned tunnel system quickly and safely. But every protocol he developed for working with civilian allies argued against bringing a child into such obvious danger. "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice carried understanding and concern. "Sometimes protecting someone means allowing them to help protect others. Sarah knows these tunnels, and the people living here are her family now. Perhaps the question isn't whether it's safe to bring her with you, but whether it's safe to leave her behind while something dangerous approaches her home." Batman made his decision. "Sarah, you'll guide me to the sealed sections, but at the first sign of danger you return to the main hub. No arguments, no exceptions. Agreed?" The girl nodded solemnly. "Agreed. But I should tell you, the thing I saw down there wasn't just big. It was smart. It had built things, organized spaces. Whatever we're dealing with, it's been down there for a long time, and it's learned how to use the tunnels as well as Mr. Otis has. They prepared quickly. Flanagan provided additional lighting, small oil lamps that would burn cleanly in the enclosed spaces. Sarah gathered rope and some simple tools, explaining the route they would need to take and the obstacles they might encounter. Batman checked his equipment, ensuring his medical supplies were readily accessible and his communication systems were functioning properly. "The mushroom gardens are this way," Sarah said, leading them through a passage that opened into a space that defied all expectations. The chamber was vast, with carefully tended beds of various fungi growing in rich, dark soil. The air was warm and humid, filled with the earthy scent of growing things. Bioluminescent varieties provided soft, natural lighting that was easier on the eyes than the gas lamps used elsewhere. "Beautiful," Batman said quietly, meaning it. The space represented years of careful cultivation, an underground ecosystem that supported both the human community and the various animals that shared their domain. "Mr. Otis taught me how to tend them," Sarah said with obvious pride. "Different types need different conditions, but they all contribute something. Food, medicine, even lighting. It's like having a whole world down here that the surface doesn't know about." At the far end of the garden chamber, partially hidden behind a curtain of growing vines, was an opening that appeared to have been carved through solid stone. It was indeed narrow, large enough for a child or small adult, but Batman would need to move carefully to avoid becoming stuck. "The passage opens up after about 50 feet, Sarah explained. "But there are several turns, and one section where you have to crawl through what used to be a drainage pipe. After that, it connects to a much older tunnel system. Batman activated his cowl's mapping systems, beginning to record their route for future reference. Stay close and remember our agreement. Any sign of danger. I go back to the main hub, Sarah finished. I understand. They entered the narrow passage, Sarah moving with the confidence of someone who had made this journey multiple times. Batman followed, his cape catching occasionally on rough stone, but his progress steady. The passage was indeed claustrophobic, but it was well constructed and showed no signs of structural instability. After several minutes of careful movement, they emerged into a tunnel that was clearly much older than Flanagan's 19th century construction. The stonework was cruder, the ceiling lower, and the air carried scents that were unfamiliar and somehow primitive. This section predates the official sewer system, Batman observed, analyzing the construction techniques. These tunnels are probably from Gotham's earliest settlement period. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice came through the cowl. I've been researching the historical records more thoroughly. There are references to natural cave systems beneath Gotham that were incorporated into later construction projects. Some of these caves were inhabited long before the city was established. Sarah pointed ahead into the darkness. The sounds come from that direction. There's a big chamber, like Mr. Otis's hub, but older. And there's something living there that's been there for a very long time. They moved deeper into the ancient tunnel system, their footsteps echoing differently than they had in the more modern passages. The acoustic properties were strange, creating reverberations that seemed to come from unexpected directions. The water moved through hidden channels. An occasional draft suggested the presence of large open spaces ahead. The smell of infection became stronger as they progressed. Not just the clean decay of natural composting, but something organic and wrong. Batman's filtration systems were working harder now, protecting him from airborne pathogens while allowing him to analyze the atmospheric composition. There, Sarah whispered, pointing to a faint glow visible around a bend in the tunnel. That's the chamber I told you about. They approached the light source carefully, Batman's enhanced vision beginning to resolve details that normal sight couldn't penetrate. The chamber ahead was indeed large, carved from natural rock formations and expanded through centuries of patient work. But unlike Flanagan's hub, this space felt alien, hostile to human presence. The light came from phosphorescent growths on the walls, not the carefully cultivated mushrooms of the garden chamber, but wild, chaotic fungi that spread across stone surfaces like infection. And moving among them, tending them with obvious intelligence, were creatures that had once been rats, but had grown far beyond normal size. My God, Batman breathed, watching as one of the giant rodents, easily the size of a large dog, carefully harvested material from the glowing fungi. They've been infected by the same parasite that's affecting the humans, but in them it's caused massive growth rather than illness. Sarah pressed close to his side, her young eyes wide as she took in the scene. There are so many of them, and they're working together like Mr. Otis's rats do, but different, hungrier. The giant rats were indeed organized, but their behavior carried an edge of desperation that was absent from Flanagan's well-fed community. They moved with nervous energy, constantly checking the tunnel entrances, as if expecting threats from multiple directions. At the center of the chamber, partially hidden by the phosphorescent growths, was a figure that might once have been human. It was difficult to tell. The infection had changed its host so dramatically that species identification was nearly impossible, but it moved with purpose and intelligence, directing the giant rat's activities with gestures and sounds that formed a complex communication system. The original source, Batman realized. Someone who came down here decades ago and was infected by the parasite, Instead of dying, they became a carrier, spreading the infection to the local rat population. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice carried urgency. The historical records mention a researcher who disappeared in these caves in the 1920s, Dr. Marcus Webb, a parasitologist who was studying the connection between urban rodent populations and disease transmission. He was last seen entering the cave system beneath the Narrows. The infected figure at the chamber's center suddenly looked up, its attention focused directly on Batman and Sarah's hiding place. Its face was no longer recognizably human, but its eyes showed unmistakable intelligence and recognition of intruders in its domain. It made a sound that was part whistle, part shriek, echoing off the chamber walls with disturbing harmonics. Immediately, the giant rats stopped their activities and began moving toward the tunnel where Batman and Sarah waited. "Run," Batman said quietly to Sarah. "Back to the main hub, now." "But now!" His voice carried absolute authority, and Sarah obeyed without further argument, disappearing back into the narrow passage with a speed that only children seemed to possess. Batman stepped into the chamber, his cowl systems analyzing the infected creatures as they approached. The parasite had caused more than just physical growth. It had enhanced their intelligence and coordination while removing the natural fear that would normally keep wild animals away from humans. The lead rat, scarred and obviously the alpha of its pack, approached with careful deliberation. It was studying Batman as intensely as he was studying it, evaluating threats and opportunities with tactical thinking that was disturbing in a supposedly mindless animal. "You're not just infected," Batman said aloud, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustic space. "You're evolved. The parasite didn't just change your size. It changed how you think, how you organize, how you plan." The infected figure that had once been Dr. Webb moved closer, its transformed features showing interest rather than hostility. When it spoke, its voice was barely recognizable as human, but the words were clear. "Protector, guardian, you understand." "I understand that you're sick," Batman replied carefully. "That the infection has changed you, changed your companions, but you're spreading that infection to innocent people." Webb's laugh was a sound that belonged in nightmares. "Innocent, they come seeking, calling, wanting what we have found." It gestured to the phosphorescent chamber around them. "Evolution, adaptation, survival below the world that discards." The giant rats had formed a loose circle around Batman, but they weren't attacking. They were listening, participating in the conversation through body language and soft vocalizations that Webb seemed to understand perfectly. "The people getting sick above," Batman said. "You're calling to them, drawing them down here. The lonely ones, the forgotten ones. We offer transformation, purpose, unity with something greater than their small surface lives." Batman's cowl was analyzing the chamber's atmosphere, mapping the distribution of parasitic spores and identifying potential treatment options. The infection was indeed airborne, but it required extended exposure to take hold. Brief contact wouldn't be enough to cause transformation, but the people who came down here, lured by Webb's psychological manipulation, were staying long enough to become infected. "Dr. Webb," Batman said, using the infected creature's original name deliberately, "you were a scientist once. You studied disease, tried to prevent suffering. Is this what you wanted your research to accomplish?" The reaction was immediate and powerful. Webb's transformed features showed recognition, confusion, and something that might have been regret. The giant rats responded to their leader's emotional state, becoming agitated and uncertain. "Webb," the creature repeated slowly, as if testing the sound of its own forgotten name. Dr. Marcus Webb, parasitologist, research into urban disease vectors. Its voice carried increasing clarity as buried memories began to surface. The caves, I came to study natural infection patterns. But the spores, the beautiful glowing spores. You became infected yourself, Batman said gently. The parasite changed you, made you forget who you were. But you're still in there, Dr. Webb. The part of you that wanted to help people, to prevent disease rather than spread it. The chamber fell silent except for the constant dripping of water and the soft breathing of the assembled creatures. Webb stood motionless, its transformed features cycling through expressions as human consciousness battled with parasitic influence. The calls, Webb said finally, its voice now recognizably human despite the physical changes. The voices that draw them down. I thought I was offering salvation, but I was only spreading what had been done to me. One of the giant rats approached Webb, nuzzling against its transformed companion with obvious affection. The relationship between the infected human and the evolved animals was clearly deep and genuine, a family forged by shared transformation and mutual dependence. Dr. Webb, Batman said carefully, the people above are dying. The infection that transformed you and your companions, it's not having the same effect on normal humans. They're getting sick, becoming delirious, but they're not evolving. They're just failing. Webb's reaction showed the return of scientific curiosity alongside human compassion. Different immune systems, different exposure patterns. Of course, what works for one species, one individual, might be toxic to another. It looked around the chamber with new awareness. I need to see them, the sick ones. I need to understand what went wrong. That's not possible, Batman replied. You're still infected, still contagious. But if you're willing to help, if you can provide information about the parasite and how it spreads. Information, yes. Analysis, yes. Webb's voice was becoming more human with each word, the scientist's training overriding decades of parasitic influence. But more than that, the spores that cool to them, the psychological attraction. I can stop it. I can make the tunnels silent again. Batman studied the infected scientist, weighing options and risks. Webb was clearly sincere in wanting to help, but the parasite's influence might reassert itself at any time. The giant rats were calm now, but they remained dangerous if they perceived threats to their leader. What would you need to do? Webb gestured toward the phosphorescent growths covering the chamber walls. The calling spores are produced by these fungi. They're what create the voices, the psychological compulsion that draws people underground. If I can modify their chemical output, change their frequency, you can stop the infection from spreading to new victims, Batman concluded, and perhaps find a way to help those who are already sick. The parasite responds to specific chemical signals. If I can synthesize the right compounds... Webb trailed off, lost in scientific possibilities. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice came through the cowl. Alfred Thompkins reports that 2 more patients have been admitted. The infection appears to be accelerating, but she's also noted that the symptoms begin to stabilize after the first 48 hours. If Dr. Webb can indeed stop the source, Batman made his decision. Dr. Webb, I'm going to trust you to keep your word, but I need guarantees. No more calling to people above ground, no more luring victims down here. And any treatment you develop needs to be tested and verified before it's administered. Agreed, Webb said immediately. But I have conditions as well. My companions and I, we can't return to the surface world The infection has made that impossible. We need assurance that this space will remain protected, that we won't be hunted or driven out. You'll have it, Batman promised. This chamber is now under my protection, but any spread of the infection beyond this space, any indication that people are being harmed, will result in immediate intervention, Webb finished. I understand, and I accept those terms. The giant rats seemed to relax as their leader reached an accord with the surface dweller. Several began moving towards sections of the chamber where Batman could now see primitive laboratory equipment, tools and instruments that Webb had obviously constructed over the decades to continue scientific work in his transformed state. The chemical modification will take time, Webb explained, beginning to gather materials. But I can begin immediately to reduce the spore production. Within hours, the psychological calling should begin to fade. Batman watched as the infected scientist began work, his movements showing the careful precision of someone who had never truly forgotten their training. The giant rats assisted with obvious intelligence, retrieving materials and preparing solutions with the coordination of an experienced research team. Sarah is safe? Webb asked as he worked, some part of his human consciousness concerned about the child who had guided Batman to this chamber. Safe, and returning to her community, Batman confirmed. She's remarkably brave. Children adapt better than adults, Webb observed, mixing compounds with steady hands despite his physical transformation. Their minds are more flexible, less bound by preconceptions about what's possible or impossible. In many ways, this underground world is better suited to young perspectives than old ones. Batman understood the implication. The children in Flanagan's community, like Sarah, weren't just surviving in the underground environment, they were thriving in it, finding opportunities and freedoms that the surface world might never offer them. The work is complete, Webb announced after nearly an hour of careful chemical preparation. The spores will begin producing different compounds within the next few hours. Instead of creating psychological attraction, they should actually produce a mild aversion. People will find reasons to avoid the area rather than being drawn to it. Batman's cowl analyzed the modified chemical signature, confirming that Webb's work appeared sound. The change would indeed affect the fungal emissions in ways that should reverse their psychological impact. And the treatment for those already infected? Webb held up a small vial of clear liquid. This should counteract the parasite's effect on human metabolism. Not a cure exactly. The infection will remain, but it will become dormant, allowing normal immune systems to regain control. That needs to be tested before administration, Batman insisted. Of course, but I volunteer as the first test subject. Webb's voice carried quiet determination. If the treatment works, it should allow me to regain more of my human consciousness while retaining the benefits of my transformation. If it fails, we'll find another way, Batman said firmly. You've already done enough by stopping the source of new infections. Webb's transformed features showed something that might have been a smile. Thank you for reminding me who I used to be. The parasite, it doesn't just change the body. It makes you forget that you were ever anything other than what it made you become. Batman prepared to leave, but Webb's voice stopped him. The Protector, Batman, you should know that not all of us who live below ground are threats to the surface world. Some of us are refugees, some are explorers, some are simply people who found different ways to live. Don't assume that hidden means hostile. I won't, Batman promised. But I also won't ignore genuine threats to innocent people, as it should be, Webb agreed. Balance, understanding, those are what separates civilization from chaos, whether above ground or below. Batman made his way back through the ancient tunnel system, following the route Sarah had shown him. The passage seemed less threatening now, more like a bridge between two different but equally valid communities. By the time he reached the mushroom gardens, the phosphorescent fungi were already beginning to show subtle changes in their emission patterns. Sarah was waiting for him in the main hub, sitting beside Flanagan and helping to sort supplies that the rats had gathered. She looked up as Batman emerged from the garden chamber, her young face showing relief and curiosity. "Did you find it? The thing that was making people sick?" "We found a solution," Batman replied carefully. "The calling sounds should stop within a few hours. People won't be drawn down here anymore unless they come by choice." Flanagan's expression showed understanding that went beyond Batman's simple explanation. "And those who are already sick? There's a potential treatment. It needs to be tested, but there's hope." Batman handed over the vial Webb had prepared. "This should be given to Dr. Tompkins for analysis and testing. If it works, everyone gets better and no one else gets sick," Sarah finished with the directness of childhood. "That's good. I like it when problems have solutions that help everyone." "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice came through the cowl. "Dr. Tompkins reports that the newest patients are showing signs of stabilization. It appears the infection may be self-limiting in humans who aren't exposed to the source for extended periods." Batman nodded, feeling the satisfaction that came with solving a complex problem without resorting to violence or destruction. The underground communities would continue to exist, but they would no longer pose a threat to the surface world. Dr. Webb would continue his research in isolation, but with renewed human perspective on the ethical implications of his work. "I should return to the surface," Batman said to Flanagan and Sarah. "But this community, your people, they're under my protection now. Anyone who threatens this place answers to me." Flanagan extended his hand in a gesture of formal agreement, "And anyone from the surface world who genuinely needs sanctuary will find it here, as they always have. Some problems are best solved through cooperation rather than confrontation." Batman shook the offered hand, then knelt beside Sarah. "You were brave tonight, and your knowledge made the difference between solving this problem and having it grow worse. Thank you." Sarah's smile was brilliant in the gaslight. "I'm glad I could help. This is my home now, and homes are worth protecting." As Batman prepared to leave through the storm drain entrance, he paused to look back at the underground community. Children and adults were moving about their evening routines, tending gardens and preparing meals, and engaging in all the ordinary activities that made up daily life. The rats moved among them as partners rather than pets, contributing their own skills to the community's collective well-being. "Master Bruce?" Alfred's voice carried warmth and approval. "I believe you've done something rather remarkable tonight. You've protected both the surface world and the underground community, not by forcing change, but by facilitating understanding. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that don't require choosing sides." Batman replied, climbing toward the surface through tunnels that would soon fall silent, no longer calling to the lost and desperate with false promises of transformation. The rain had stopped while he was underground, leaving the cobblestones of the Narrows glistening under the gas lamp's warm light. The air felt cleaner somehow, freed from the subtle chemical influences that had been drawing people toward dangerous choices. Over the following days, Dr. Tompkins confirmed that Webb's treatment was effective, helping the infected patients regain their health while leaving them with no lasting effects from their brief transformation. The underground community settled into their normal routines, no longer disrupted by the arrival of confused and desperate surface dwellers. Batman made occasional visits to the Narrows, checking on both the visible community above ground and the hidden one below. The arrangement held two different ways of life coexisting without conflict, each offering different forms of shelter and belonging to those who needed them. In his final report on the incident, Batman noted that Gotham's true strength lay not in the uniformity of its communities, but in their diversity. Whether above ground or below, in gleaming towers or hidden tunnels, the city's residents found ways to create meaning, purpose, and family, according to their individual needs and circumstances. The Narrows continued to be different from the rest of Gotham, but now that difference felt like harmony rather than discord. Rain still fell on ancient cobblestones, steam still rose from manholes, and gas lamps still flickered in the perpetual mist. But the sounds were natural now. Water moving through channels, wind sighing through ironwork, and the gentle murmur of people living their lives in whatever spaces they could make their own. In the underground hub, Sarah was learning to read by gaslight, while Flanagan's rats brought her interesting objects they'd found in their explorations. In the sealed chamber, Dr. Webb continued his research with the assistance of his evolved companions, working toward treatments for diseases that had plagued both surface and underground communities for generations. And above it all, Batman continued his eternal patrol, protecting a city that was far more complex and wonderful than most of its residents would ever know. As Batman emerged from the storm drains of the Narrows for the final time, the ancient cobblestones beneath his feet seemed to whisper their approval. The rain had washed the streets clean, leaving behind only the gentle music of water finding its way through channels both seen and hidden. Behind him, two communities, one above, one below, had found their balance, their harmony restored, through understanding rather than force. The gas lamps flickered in their familiar rhythm as he made his way through the narrow alleyways. But tonight their light seemed warmer, more welcoming. The Narrows had always been a place where Gotham's forgotten found refuge, and now that refuge extended deeper than anyone on the surface had ever imagined. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice came softly through the cowl, carrying the satisfaction of a problem well solved. Dr. Tompkins reports the last of the patients have made full recoveries. The underground communities appear to have settled into their normal routines. Batman paused at the edge of the Narrows, where the ancient district gave way to Gotham's more modern neighborhoods. The transition was always jarring, from gas lamps to electric streetlights, from cobblestone to asphalt, from whispered secrets to the ordinary noise of urban life. Something else requires your attention, Alfred continued, his tone shifting to carry a note of concern. There have been reports from the Bowery district, strange incidents involving what witnesses describe as voices in the walls and peculiar behavior among some of the area's more vulnerable residents. The Bowery, another of Gotham's forgotten corners, but different from the Narrows. Where the Narrows held its secrets in underground chambers and ancient architecture, the Bowery's mysteries lived in abandoned buildings, and the shadowed spaces between what was real and what existed only in damaged minds. What kind of incidents? Batman asked, though he was already moving in that direction, his cape catching the last wisps of mist from the Narrow's perpetual dampness. Homeless individuals found in seemingly impossible locations. Locked rooms, sealed basements, all appear unharmed but disoriented, speaking of following a gentle voice that promised safety and comfort. Most concerning, they all mention the same thing. A soft, almost musical voice that seemed to come from a wooden companion. Batman's step quickened. He knew that voice, that wooden companion. It had been months since Arnold Wesker and his ventriloquist dummy Scarface had surfaced in Gotham's criminal underground. but the pattern Alfred described fit their psychological profile perfectly. "The ventriloquist?" he said quietly. "Indeed, but the reports suggest something different from his usual criminal activities. No robberies, no violence, just confused individuals found in impossible places, all speaking of following a voice that offered them rest and safety." As Batman left the Narrows behind, the sounds of the night changed around him. The gentle symphony of dripping water and settling stone gave way to the harsher rhythms of the modern city. Traffic, sirens, the electric hum of neon signs reflecting off wet pavement. But underneath it all, if he listened carefully, he could almost hear something else. A soft, rhythmic murmuring, like someone singing a lullaby just beyond the edge of perception. The Bowery waited ahead, its own secrets and sorrows ready to unfold in the spaces between what was real and what lived only in the fractured minds of those society had left behind. Rain drummed against the windows of Wayne Manor with the steady rhythm of a metronome, each droplet adding to the symphony that had been playing across Gotham for 3 consecutive nights. In the cave beneath, Batman studied crime scene photographs spread across his workstation like pieces of a puzzle that refused to reveal its pattern. The images showed empty offices, abandoned warehouses, and meeting rooms where powerful men had simply vanished. "Peculiar, isn't it?" Alfred's voice carried the measured cadence of someone who had witnessed Gotham's oddities for decades. He descended the stone steps carrying a silver tray with steaming tea, his footsteps echoing softly in the vast chamber. 7 crime bosses, all disappeared within a fortnight, yet their organizations continue operating as if nothing has changed. Batman lifted one of the photographs. Vincent Torino's office, untouched except for a single sheet of paper on the mahogany desk. The writing was shaky, uncertain, yet the signature was definitely Torino's. A complete confession of his crimes, along with instructions for his lieutenant to assume control and clean up the family business. The handwriting analysis confirms authenticity, Batman said, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had been working the case for 72 hours straight. But witnesses say Torino was terrified when he wrote it, kept looking over his shoulder, mumbling about the boss watching. Alfred set the tea beside the photographs and picked up another document, this one signed by Maria Santos, the iron-fisted leader of the Southside drug trade. Her confession detailed operations that the GCPD had been trying to uncover for years, written in the same nervous scrawl. 7 confessions, 7 disappearances, Alfred mused, adjusting his reading glasses. All written in their own hands, yet all bearing the same theatrical quality, as if they were performing lines from a script. He paused, studying the documents more carefully. "Master Bruce, may I suggest something that might seem far-fetched?" Batman looked up from the crime scene photos, noting the particular tone Alfred used when his theatrical background offered insight that pure detective work might miss. "During my younger days in London's West End, I encountered a playwright who specialized in psychological pieces. He would study his actors so thoroughly that he could predict their every gesture, every vocal inflection. By the end of rehearsals, the actors would claim they could hear his voice in their heads, guiding their performances even when he wasn't present. The implication hung in the air like smoke from an old stage effect. Batman reached for his cowl, already formulating plans. Oracle, I need you to cross-reference the disappearances with Gotham's entertainment districts. Look for patterns, theaters, performance venues, anywhere someone might be rehearsing." Oracle's voice crackled through the cave's communication system. "Already on it. There's something interesting. Each disappearance corresponds with reported disturbances near the old Majestic Theatre in the Bowery. Neighbors complain about voices carrying late into the night, but when police investigate, they find the building empty. The Majestic Theatre. Alfred's expression shifted, memory painting shadows across his weathered features. "I remember that venue," he said quietly. "Before the war, it hosted some of Gotham's most ambitious productions. Vaudeville, drama, even experimental pieces that pushed the boundaries of what theater could accomplish. Batman was already moving toward the Batmobile, but Alfred's next words stopped him. There was a young man who performed there in the late performances. Arnold Wesker, if memory serves. Brilliant with voices, could throw his voice so convincingly that audiences would turn around, certain someone behind them had spoken. But he was fragile. The war changed many things, but it broke him entirely. The name triggered Oracle's databases. Arnold Wesker, age 57, committed to Arkham 3 times for dissociative disorders and violent episodes. Last known address, a pause. The Majestic Theatre building. He's been squatting there since his last release. Batman slipped into the driver's seat, but Alfred approached the vehicle before he could depart. "Master Bruce, if I may." Alfred's tone carried the weight of decades spent understanding both Bruce Wayne and Batman. The theater was Mr. Wesker's refuge before it became his prison. Be careful not to let it become yours as well. Sometimes the roles we play for others become the roles that play us. The drive through Gotham's rain-soaked streets gave Batman time to process what they knew. 7 crime bosses, each writing detailed confessions before vanishing. A broken man living in an abandoned theater, throwing his voice into the shadows, and somewhere in between, a pattern that felt less like random crime and more like performance art. The Bowery district wore its decay like stage makeup. Dramatic shadows cast by broken streetlights. Fog rolling between buildings like set pieces waiting for their cue. The Majestic Theatre loomed at the end of the block, its marquee dark for over a decade. Poster frames holding nothing but shadows and memories. Batman approached from the roof, noting the careful way someone had maintained access routes, while letting the building appear completely abandoned. Windows had been covered from inside with black fabric, but thin lines of candlelight leaked around the edges. Someone was definitely inside, and they had been there for some time. Detective Rene Montoya's voice crackled through his cowl as he prepared to descend. "Batman, we just found another one. Tommy Marconi, head of the dockside operations. Same pattern. Written confession, signed documents, transferring power, and then gone. His crew says he was acting strange for days, talking to someone who wasn't there. How long ago? 2 hours, maybe 3? But here's the weird part. Witnesses say they could hear 2 voices coming from his office. Marconi's and someone else's. But when they broke down the door, only Marconi was inside, and he was alone. Batman studied the theater's architecture, noting how sound might carry through the old building's walls and ventilation systems. "Oracle, I need building plans for the Majestic. Focus on acoustics. How sound travels, where voices might project." "Sending them now, but Bruce, there's something else. I've been monitoring police scanners, and there are reports of strange sounds coming from inside the theater right now. Voices, like someone's rehearsing." As if summoned by Oracle's words, Batman heard it, faint but unmistakable voices drifting up from the building below. One voice nervous and pleading, the other harsh and commanding. A conversation, or perhaps an argument, echoing through decades of accumulated silence. Batman descended through a damaged skylight, landing silently in what had once been the theater's upper balcony. The space opened below him like a cathedral of entertainment, rows of seats facing a stage where shadows danced in candlelight. The voices were clearer now, coming from the stage itself. "Please, Mr. Scarface," the nervous voice pleaded. "I don't want to hurt anyone else. The confessions were enough, weren't they? We got what we needed." "Dummy!" The second voice was harsh, gravelly, filled with violence barely contained. "You don't get to decide when we're done. The show ain't over till I say it's over." Batman moved carefully along the balcony rail, using the theater's acoustics to mask his presence. On the stage below, illuminated by dozens of candles arranged in theatrical positions, Arnold Wesker sat in a simple wooden chair. In his lap, he held a ventriloquist's dummy dressed in an old-fashioned suit, its wooden face carved into a permanent sneer. "But the police will come," Wesker continued in his own voice, his body language that of someone pleading with a superior. "They'll find us, and then—" "Let them come," Scarface's voice erupted from Wesker's lips, though the man's mouth barely moved. "We got the whole theater rigged for the final act. Every entrance, every exit, every hiding spot them costumed freaks might try to use." Batman studied the stage setup more carefully. Wesker had transformed the theater into an elaborate diorama of Gotham's underworld. Small figurines representing the missing crime bosses were arranged in precise positions, each accompanied by tiny written confessions. At the center of the display, a larger figure, clearly meant to represent District Attorney Harvey Dent, sat bound to a miniature chair. "Tomorrow night," Wesker said, though his voice had taken on some of Scarface's commanding tone, "the DA will be here for the final performance, just like we rehearsed." "Exactly like we rehearsed," Scarface agreed, though Batman noticed Wesker's free hand manipulating the dummy's jaw. 7 acts of confession, and then the grand finale. The dummy DA learns what happens to people who try to shut down family business. Batman activated his cowl's recording systems, documenting both the threat against Harvey Dent and the intricate planning that had gone into Wesker's psychological theater. The man had clearly been preparing for weeks, maybe months. Every detail was planned like a stage production. "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice came softly through the cowl. "I've been researching the Majestic's old programs. Arnold Wesker performed there in 1987, just before his first breakdown. The final show was called The Confession Hour, experimental theater where audience members were encouraged to share their darkest secrets." The connection clicked into place. Wesker wasn't just randomly targeting crime bosses. He was recreating that final performance, using Gotham's underworld as both cast and audience for his psychological breakdown. "Oracle, I need everything on Harvey Dent's schedule tomorrow. Public appearances, court dates, anything that might make him accessible." "Already checking." He's got a late meeting at City Hall, then dinner with Commissioner Gordon. After that, he was planning to review case files at his office. Alone. Batman watched as Wesker carefully adjusted the position of tiny figurines on his stage, muttering dialogue for each character. The man's mental state was deteriorating rapidly. He was becoming less able to distinguish between his own voice and Scarface's, between the miniature stage and reality. "The performance must be perfect," Wesker said, and Batman couldn't tell which personality was speaking. Every line memorized, every cue hit exactly on time. The audience expects nothing less. "That's right, dummy." Scarface's voice boomed through the theater. "And if anyone tries to interrupt our show, they become part of the cast, permanent-like." Batman began mapping the theater's layout, noting the exits Wesker had mentioned, rigging. The man's background in stagecraft had served him well. He had turned the entire building into an elaborate trap, with himself and Scarface as the puppet masters pulling every string. A soft sound from the lobby below caught Batman's attention. Someone else was entering the theater, moving carefully, professionally. Batman enhanced his cowl's audio pickup and caught the faint whisper of radio communication. Montoya to control. I'm inside the Majestic Theater, confirming sounds of occupation, possible suspect on premises. Detective Montoya was investigating alone, unaware of the elaborate security measures Wesker had installed. Batman needed to intercept her before she triggered whatever defenses the ventriloquist had prepared. But as he moved to descend, Wesker's head snapped up like a hunting dog catching a scent. Someone's here, he whispered to Scarface. Not part of the cast, not part of the show. Then they're the audience, Scarface replied. And the audience don't get to leave until the final curtain. Wesker stood, cradling the dummy carefully, and began moving through the theater with surprising stealth. He knew every creaking board, every shadow that might conceal movement. This was his domain, and he had spent years learning its secrets. Batman descended rapidly, using the theater's fly system, the network of ropes and pulleys that had once moved scenery, to swing down toward the main floor. He needed to reach Montoya before Wesker did, but the detective had already moved deeper into the building. "Control, this is Montoya." Her voice crackled faintly. "I've got evidence of long-term habitation. Candles, makeshift furniture, and Jesus, there are crime scene photos everywhere. Looks like someone's been planning something big." "Get her!" Scarface's voice echoed through the theater as Wesker began moving faster. "She's seen too much. The show must go on." Batman hit the main floor running, using his knowledge of theater architecture to predict Wesker's route. The ventriloquist would try to use the building's acoustic properties to disorient Montoya, make her think threats were coming from multiple directions. "Detective," Batman's voice came through her radio. "This is Batman. You need to evacuate immediately. The building is trapped." "Batman?" Montoya's voice carried both relief and confusion. "How are you? Where are you?" "Moving to intercept the suspect. Follow my voice back to the main entrance, but don't use your flashlight. He's tracking light sources." Batman heard movement in the theater's upper galleries. Wesker was using the catwalk system to get above Montoya's position. The ventriloquist had the advantages of familiarity and preparation, but Batman had something else, understanding of how broken minds worked when pushed to their limit. "Arnold Wesker," Batman called out, his voice carrying through the theater's acoustic system. "I know you can hear me. The performance doesn't have to end like this." "Who said that?" Scarface's voice boomed from somewhere in the darkness. "Nobody interrupts the show. Nobody." "The show's already been interrupted," Batman replied, moving through the shadows toward where he'd last heard Montoya. 7 crime bosses are missing. The police know about the confessions. Your audience is already walking out. A moment of silence, then Wesker's own voice, small and frightened. "They can't leave, they can't. We've worked so hard on the script, every word perfect, every scene rehearsed." "Scripts can be rewritten," Batman said gently, remembering Alfred's advice about understanding the man behind the madness. "New performances, better endings, but not if you hurt Detective Montoya." "She's part of it now," Scarface snarled. "Part of the cast. She don't get to choose her role." Batman heard a soft gasp from somewhere ahead. Montoya had encountered Wesker in the darkness, but instead of violence, he heard conversation. "Arnold Wesker?" Montoya's voice was calm, professional. "I'm Detective Montoya, GCPD. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk about the missing people." "DB confessed," Wesker replied, and Batman could hear the confusion in his voice. People told the truth about their crimes. That's good, isn't it? Truth is supposed to be good. Truth is good, Montoya agreed. But what happened to them after they confessed? A long pause. Then Scarface's voice, but quieter than before. They went away, had to go away. The script said so. Batman continued moving through the darkness, using the conversation to triangulate their positions. Montoya was handling the situation exactly right, engaging with Wesker's humanity rather than his delusions. "Where did they go, Arnold?" she asked gently. I don't remember." Wesker's voice was becoming more childlike. "Scarface handles that part. I just do the voices. I just do what I'm told." "And what does Scarface tell you to do? To be strong, to take charge, to make people listen?" A pause. "But I don't want to be strong. I just want to do the voices. Make people smile like they used to, before everything got so dark." Batman reached the edge of the conversation, close enough to intervene if necessary. Montoya had positioned herself where Wesker could see her face in the dim candlelight, making herself human rather than threatening. "The voices you do are amazing," she continued. "I've heard ventriloquists before, but you make Scarface sound completely real. How do you do that?" "Practice," Wesker said simply. "Lots and lots of practice. Started when I was little, after the accident. Easier to let someone else do the talking, someone braver." "But you're brave, Arnold. You're talking to me right now, not Scarface." For a moment, Wesker looked down at the dummy in his arms as if seeing it for the first time. He's quiet now. Usually he's always talking, always telling me what to do. But right now, he's just wood," Montoya finished gently. "Just a puppet that can only speak when you give it your voice." The realization seemed to hit Wesker like a physical blow. He staggered, nearly dropping Scarface, and Batman saw tears reflecting candlelight on the man's weathered cheeks. "What have I done?" Wesker whispered. "Those people, I made them write things, say things. I made them disappear. Where did they go?" Scarface's voice erupted suddenly, but now Batman could see the slight movement of Wesker's throat, the unconscious manipulation of his own vocal cords. "Tell her where they went, dummy." Wesker shook his head violently. No. I don't want to remember. I don't want to know what Scarface made me do." Batman stepped into the candlelight, his presence calm rather than threatening. "Arnold, those people need help. If they're still alive, we need to find them." "Batman?" Wesker looked up with the expression of a child who had been caught in wrongdoing. I remember you from before at Arkham. You were kind. You listened." "I'm listening now," Batman replied, "and I know you want to help them." Wesker hugged Scarface tighter, rocking slightly. "The basement," he whispered, "below the old dressing rooms. Scarface said they needed to practice their lines until they got them perfect." Montoya immediately activated her radio. "Control, I need EMT units to the Majestic Theatre basement level. Multiple possible victims, unknown condition." Batman was already moving toward the basement access, but he paused to look back at Wesker. "Arnold, tomorrow night you were planning something with District Attorney Dent. Can you tell me about that?" "The finale," Wesker said, his voice distant. "Scarface said the DA needed to confess too, in front of an audience, a real audience, not just," he gestured vaguely at the miniature figures on his stage. "But that's not going to happen," Batman stated firmly. "The show is over." "No," Scarface's voice exploded from Wesker's throat. "The show ain't over till I say it's over. Till I..." Wesker's voice cracked, the two personalities warring visibly on his face. "Till we..." "Till you decide," Montoya said softly. "Arnold, you're the one with the voice. You choose what it says." Wesker looked down at Scarface, then slowly, deliberately set the dummy aside on a nearby chair. When he spoke again, it was in his own voice, quiet but clear. "The show is over." The basement of the Majestic Theatre had been converted into a makeshift prison, cells created from old stage plates and theatrical scrims. All 7 crime bosses were alive, though clearly traumatized by their extended captivity. They had been fed regularly, kept warm, but subjected to constant psychological pressure to rehearse their confessions until Wesker believed their remorse was genuine. "He made us write the same confession over and over," Vincent Torino explained to Batman as EMTs checked his vital signs. "Said we had to get the performance right, had to really feel sorry for what we'd done. And the whole time that damn puppet kept threatening us. If we didn't put enough emotion into it, Maria Santos was in worse condition, having spent the longest in captivity." "He wasn't evil," she told Montoya as they helped her toward the ambulance. "Crazy, yes, but not evil. He really thought he was helping us, making us better people. And maybe in some twisted way, he was right." Batman found Alfred waiting by the Batmobile when he emerged from the theater. The butler's expression mixed relief with concern. "All 7 recovered safely," Batman reported. "Wesker's being taken to Arkham for evaluation, but Dr. Leland thinks his prognosis is better this time. The separation from Scarface was his own choice. And the dummy? Evidence locker. Though I suspect Wesker will create another one eventually. The question is whether it will be as controlling as Scarface was." Alfred nodded thoughtfully. "In theater, Master Bruce, we learn that every actor must eventually choose which roles define them and which roles they simply perform. Mr. Wesker spent so long letting Scarface speak for him that he forgot he had his own voice." As they drove through Gotham's pre-dawn streets, Batman reflected on Alfred's words. How many roles did he himself perform? Bruce Wayne, Batman, the grieving son, the protector, the symbol of justice, and how often did he let those roles speak for him rather than finding his own voice beneath the masks? "Alfred," he said finally, "do you ever worry that I've lost myself in the performance?" The butler was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer with characteristic care. "I worry, Master Bruce, that you sometimes forget that the performance serves the man, not the other way around. But then I see moments like tonight, when you chose compassion over justice, understanding over punishment, and I know that Bruce Wayne is still there, still choosing how Batman speaks." Back at Wayne Manor, as dawn broke over Gotham, Batman reviewed the night's events in his case files. Arnold Wesker would receive treatment, the crime bosses would face justice through proper legal channels, and Harvey Dent would never know how close he had come to becoming part of a madman's final performance. But the real resolution, Batman realized, had happened in that moment when Wesker chose to set Scarface aside and speak in his own voice. It was a choice Batman himself made every night when he decided what Batman would do, how Batman would act, what Batman would represent. The theater had taught them all something about the relationship between performer and role, between the voice that speaks and the voice that chooses what to say. In Gotham's ongoing drama of justice and madness, perhaps that was the most important lesson of all, that no matter how many masks we wear, we always retain the power to choose our own lines. As Alfred brought morning tea to the study where Bruce Wayne sat reading case files instead of Batman reviewing crime scenes, the butler smiled slightly. The performance continued, but the performer remained in control. 3 days later, Batman returned to the Majestic Theatre. The building stood empty again, but somehow it felt different, less haunted, more at peace. The candles had been extinguished, the makeshift stage cleared away, yet something of Wesker's presence lingered in the shadow. Not Scarface's malevolent energy, but something gentler, the memory of a man who had once brought joy to audiences through the simple magic of throwing his voice. Oracle's research had revealed more of the theater's history. The Majestic was known for experimental performances, she explained through Batman's cowl as he walked the empty aisles. Psychological dramas, interactive pieces where the line between audience and performer was deliberately blurred. Wesker wasn't just performing there, he was part of a tradition. Alfred's voice joined the conversation from Wayne Manor. Indeed. The theater was founded by Marcus Thorne, a psychologist who believed performance could heal trauma. His theory was that by giving voice to our inner conflicts, we could gain mastery over them. Mr. Wesker simply took the concept too far. Batman paused at the stage where he had first seen Wesker with Scarface. The miniature diorama had been carefully documented and removed, but the space still held the echo of that strange performance. He created an entire world where he had control, Batman observed, where he could make powerful people confess their crimes, face consequences, become better. The irony, Alfred noted, is that Mr. Wesker himself was the one person in his world who couldn't make that choice. Until Detective Montoya reminded him that he had a voice of his own, Oracle's typing was audible in the background. Speaking of Detective Montoya, she's requested a meeting. Says she has something you need to see regarding the Wesker case. An hour later, Batman met Montoya on the roof of the GCPD building. The detective looked tired but satisfied, the expression of someone who had closed a difficult case but learned something troubling in the process. We finished interviewing all 7 victims, she began without preamble. And there's something weird about their statements. They all say the same thing, that despite the trauma, despite being held captive and psychologically manipulated, they feel different. Better, somehow. Batman waited for her to continue, recognizing the complexity in her voice. Vincent Torino has started attending AA meetings. Maria Santos dissolved her drug operation voluntarily and turned state's evidence against her suppliers. 3 others have made genuine attempts to go legitimate. Montoya shook her head. It's like Wesker actually did what he set out to do. He made them face their crimes so thoroughly that they genuinely repented. Traumatic conversion, Batman said quietly. Sometimes extreme experiences can trigger genuine personality changes, but at what cost? That's what I keep asking myself. 7 people are probably going to live better lives because of what happened to them, but that doesn't make what Wesker did right, does it? She looked out over Gotham's skyline. How do we measure justice when the crime accidentally produces positive results? Batman considered her question, thinking of his own methods, his own use of fear and intimidation to achieve justice. Intent matters, he said finally. Wesker wasn't trying to help them. He was using them as props in his psychological theater. The fact that some good came from it doesn't justify the means. But doesn't it complicate them? Montoya pressed. I've been thinking about this case for days, and I keep coming back to the same question. How many of our methods are justified only by their results? How often do we tell ourselves we're helping when we're really just performing? The question hung between them like fog from the theater's stage effects. Batman found himself thinking of all the criminals he had terrified into confessing, all the fear he had used as a tool for justice. Were his methods so different from Wesker's psychological manipulation? The difference, he said slowly, is choice. The people I confront always have the option to walk away, to choose differently. Wesker took that choice away from his victims. Did he? Montoya asked. Because from what I can tell, each of those crime bosses could have refused to write the confessions. They were scared, yes, but not physically coerced. They chose to write those statements because Wesker made them believe it was the right thing to do. Batman felt a chill that had nothing to do with Gotham's night air. You're suggesting that Wesker's methods were more ethical than I want to admit. I'm suggesting that the line between justice and manipulation might be thinner than any of us would like to believe. Montoya pulled her coat tighter against the wind. And I'm wondering if that's something we all need to think about. After Montoya departed, Batman remained on the rooftop, contemplating her words. Oracle's voice broke the silence. She makes some valid points, but I've been analyzing Wesker's psychological profile, and there's something else to consider. His methods worked because his victims recognized something genuine in him. Real remorse, real desire for justice, even if it was twisted by his mental illness. Authenticity. In theater, audiences can always tell when a performer doesn't believe in their role. Mr. Wesker's tragedy was that he believed completely in what he was doing. His victims sensed that sincerity, even through their fear. Batman activated his grappling gun, preparing to continue his patrol. And what does that say about the rest of us? About the roles we play in the name of justice? Perhaps, Alfred suggested, it says that the most important performance is the one we give to ourselves, when we can look in the mirror and believe that our methods serve something greater than our own needs for control or revenge. The following week brought an unexpected development. Dr. Joan Leland from Arkham contacted Batman with a request that was both professional and personal. Arnold Wesker has asked to see you, she explained during their meeting in her office. His recovery has been remarkable, probably the most stable he's been in decades, but he says he needs to finish the performance properly before he can truly move forward. Batman studied the case file Leland had provided. Wesker's progress was indeed impressive. Group therapy sessions where he spoke in his own voice, art therapy projects that didn't involve puppets or ventriloquism, even the beginning of genuine friendships with other patients. What does he mean by finishing the performance? Batman asked. I'm not entirely sure. He won't elaborate until he speaks with you directly, but I believe it has something to do with accountability. Not just for his victims, but for himself. An hour later, Batman sat across from Arnold Wesker in one of Arkham's consultation rooms. The man looked younger somehow, as if setting aside Scarface had lifted years of accumulated weight from his shoulders, but his eyes held a clarity that was both hopeful and haunting. Thank you for coming, Wesker said, his voice soft but steady. I know you must be busy, and I know I don't deserve your time after what I did. You asked to see me, Batman replied. I'm listening. Wesker nodded, clasping his hands in his lap. I've been thinking about those people. The ones I hurt. Dr. Leland says they're doing better, that some of them have changed their lives. But that doesn't make what I did to them right. No, Batman agreed. It doesn't. I want to make amends. Real amends. Not just saying I'm sorry. Wesker's voice gained strength as he spoke. I want to write letters of apology to each of them, in my own words, not Scarface's, and I want to donate something to help other people who might be where I was, lost, angry, letting someone else's voice control their choices. Batman leaned forward slightly. What did you have in mind? The Majestic Theatre is going to be torn down unless someone buys it, and I inherited some money from my parents, enough to purchase the building and restore it. Wesker's eyes brightened with something Batman hadn't expected to see, hope. I want to turn it into a community center. a place where people can learn to find their own voices, literally and figuratively. Therapy programs, youth theater, adult education, all the things that might have helped me before I let Scarface take over. The proposal was ambitious, requiring not just funding but extensive planning and community support. But as Wesker outlined his vision, Batman recognized something profound. This was a man trying to transform his greatest failure into his most meaningful contribution. "You'd need partners," Batman said. "People with experience in community outreach, education, mental health services." "I know, and I know it might not work, but I have to try. It's the only performance that really matters now. Trying to use what I learned about myself to help other people find themselves." Over the following months, Batman watched with quiet amazement as Wesker's vision took shape. The man's sincerity and detailed planning attracted support from unexpected quarters. The Wayne Foundation provided matching funds for the building restoration. Dr. Leland consulted on the therapy programs. Detective Montoya helped navigate city permits and regulations. Most surprisingly, several of Wesker's former victims chose to support the project. Vincent Torino, now genuinely sober and working to reform his family's legitimate businesses, provided construction expertise. Maria Santos, using her organizational skills in legal enterprises, helped develop the center's outreach programs. "It's like he gave them a gift," Montoya observed during one of her regular meetings with Batman. "Not the trauma, that was real and damaging, but the opportunity to rebuild themselves completely, and now they're choosing to help others do the same thing." The Majestic Community Center opened on a rainy Thursday evening, exactly 1 year after the night Wesker had set Scarface aside and chosen to speak in his own voice. The restored theater glowed with warm light, its lobby filled with neighbors, former patients, city officials, and social workers. Arnold Wesker, wearing a simple suit and speaking clearly into a small microphone, addressed the gathered crowd. "This building was once a place where I lost myself," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the space without any theatrical tricks. "Tonight, I hope it becomes a place where other people can find themselves, not through performance or pretense, but through the simple act of choosing their own words, their own voices, their own roles in the world." Batman watched from the balcony, noting how Wesker commanded the room through quiet authenticity rather than theatrical manipulation. Alfred's voice came softly through his cowl. "Quite a transformation, Master Bruce. From puppet master to genuine leader." "He's still performing," Batman observed. "But now he's performing himself instead of letting someone else perform him." "Indeed. And perhaps that's the lesson for all of us, that the best performance is authenticity, and the most powerful voice is our own." As the evening continued, Batman saw dozens of people exploring the center's facilities. A youth theater workshop where teenagers learned to project their voices with confidence, a support group meeting where adults practiced speaking about difficult experiences, an art therapy space where creativity served healing rather than delusion. In the center's small administrative office, Batman found a framed photograph that made him pause. It showed the original Majestic Theater in its heyday, filled with audiences enjoying legitimate entertainment. But what caught his attention was a handwritten note attached to the frame, written in Wesker's careful script. "The show goes on, but now we choose our own roles." Before leaving, Batman stopped by Wesker's office. The man was alone, reviewing schedules for the following week's programs. No puppet sat on his desk. No second voice whispered suggestions. Just Arnold Wesker, finally comfortable with the sound of his own thoughts. "How does it feel?" Batman asked, "being the only voice in your head?" Wesker smiled, a genuine expression free of theatrical calculation. "Quiet, he said. Sometimes lonely, but honest. And after so many years of lies, honesty feels like the most beautiful sound in the world. As Batman departed through Gotham's fog-shrouded streets, he carried with him the image of that transformed theater. A place where broken voices had learned to speak truly, where performance served healing rather than deception. In a city that seemed perpetually caught between shadows and light, it stood as proof that even the most damaged souls could choose to speak with their own voice. Alfred was waiting with tea when Bruce Wayne finally returned to the manor in the early hours of morning. "Successful evening?" the butler inquired. "Educational," Bruce replied, settling into his chair. "I learned something about the difference between performance and authenticity." "And what was that, Master Bruce?" Bruce sipped his tea thoughtfully. "The best actors don't disappear into their roles. They bring their roles to life through their own truth. Wesker spent years letting Scarface perform him. Tonight, I watched him perform Arnold Wesker, and the difference was profound." Alfred nodded with satisfaction. "Perhaps that's why your own performance as Batman works so well. You're not playing a character. You're expressing Bruce Wayne through different means. Sometimes I wonder if I know the difference anymore," Bruce admitted. "The fact that you wonder," Alfred replied gently, "is how I know you haven't lost yourself in the role. Mr. Wesker's tragedy was that he stopped questioning, stopped choosing. You never have." As dawn broke over Gotham, Bruce Wayne sat in comfortable silence, considering the night's revelations. In the distance, the bells of St. Augustine's Cathedral chimed the hour. The same bells that had featured in his previous case. The same steady voice that had called Gotham's faithful to prayer for centuries. 6 months after the majestic community center's opening, Batman made a routine patrol through the Bowery district. The area had changed subtly, not dramatically, but in the small ways that mattered most. Fewer broken windows, more people walking confidently at night, the sound of laughter occasionally drifting from the restored theater building. He paused on a rooftop across from the center, watching through the large windows as an evening support group concluded their session. Arnold Wesker moved among the participants, offering quiet words of encouragement, his presence calm and reassuring. No trace remained of the broken man who had once terrorized crime bosses with puppet-driven psychological theater. "Oracle, what's the crime statistics update for this district?" Batman subvocalized. "Remarkable improvement," came the reply. "Violent crime down 37%, property crime down 28%. But the interesting part is the nature of the remaining incidents. They're increasingly being resolved through community mediation rather than traditional law enforcement." Batman watched as Wesker locked up the building for the night, performing the simple ritual with obvious care and satisfaction. The man paused at the theater's original marquee, now restored and displaying upcoming community events. Youth Voices Workshop, Adult Literacy Theater, Veterans Expression Group, Master Bruce. Alfred's voice came through the cowl. "I've been reviewing the center's quarterly reports. Their programs have expanded to include partnerships with 3 other community organizations. Mr. Wesker's approach to healing through authentic self-expression appears to be contagious in the best possible way." A figure emerged from the shadows near the theater. Detective Montoya, completing her own evening rounds. She approached Wesker with the easy familiarity of someone who had become both colleague and friend. Their conversation was brief but warm, 2 people who had found mutual respect through shared understanding of human complexity. "Montoya's been volunteering there twice a week," Oracle noted. teaching a workshop called Finding Your Professional Voice, helping people navigate interactions with authority figures, job interviews, legal situations. Says it's changed how she approaches her own police work. Batman descended from the rooftop, moving through alleys that had once echoed with criminal activity and now held only the normal sounds of a neighborhood settling into rest. He passed a small playground where children's laughter from earlier in the day seemed to linger in the evening air, a barber shop whose owner had started staying open later to provide a safe gathering place, a corner grocery where the elderly proprietor no longer feared the approaching darkness. At the theater's stage door, Batman noticed something that made him pause, a small plaque, newly installed, bearing a simple inscription, "In memory of all the voices that were lost, and in celebration of all the voices yet to be found." Below it, in smaller text, the Scarface Memorial Fund for Mental Health Recovery. He named a memorial fund after his own demon, Batman observed quietly, transforming the symbol of his greatest failure into a tool for helping others. Alfred replied with evident approval. There's something profoundly courageous about that level of accountability. Inside the theater, a single light remained on, not the dramatic candles of Wesker's delusional period, but a simple work lamp where someone was reading at a small desk. Through the window, Batman could see it was Maria Santos, the former drug dealer who had become the center's volunteer coordinator. She was reviewing applications for the next session of programs, her concentration absolute. She completed her GED through the center's literacy program, Oracle reported. Now she's working toward a degree in social work. Says she wants to help other people transition from criminal life to legitimate opportunities. Batman thought of the 7 crime bosses who had been Wesker's unwilling participants in that original Twisted performance. Each had chosen a different path, following their captivity and rescue. 3 had genuinely reformed their operations. 2 had fled Gotham entirely. 1 had returned to criminal activity and been arrested through conventional police work. And 1, Maria Santos, had transformed herself so completely that she was now helping others make similar journeys. The most successful performance of all, Batman murmured. Sir? Oracle inquired. Nothing. Just thinking about authentic transformation versus theatrical change. As he prepared to continue his patrol, Batman noticed a small group of teenagers approaching the theater. They weren't breaking in or causing trouble. They were gathering for what appeared to be an informal late-night discussion group, sitting on the theater's front steps and talking quietly among themselves. One of the young people looked up as Batman's shadow passed overhead, not with fear or excitement, but with a simple nod of acknowledgement. No drama, no performance, just recognition between 2 figures who were part of Gotham's complex community of protectors and protected. Those kids are part of the youth mentorship program, Oracle explained. They meet informally after the official sessions to continue their discussions. Wesker doesn't organize it, it's entirely their initiative. They've created their own support network. Self-directed healing, Alfred observed. The best possible outcome. They've learned to find their own voices and use them to help each other. Batman swung away through Gotham's night, but the image of those young people remained with him. A testament to what could be accomplished when broken systems were rebuilt with authentic intention, rather than theatrical manipulation. The majestic theater had become what it was always meant to be, a place where voices could be heard, understood, and strengthened. Later, as the sun began to rise over Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne found himself in the conservatory, a space he rarely used, but which had always provided quiet comfort. Alfred brought coffee and settled into a nearby chair, recognizing one of those moments when his charge needed to process complex thoughts through conversation. Alfred, Bruce began slowly, Do you think Wesker's transformation is genuine, or is it just a more sophisticated performance? The butler considered the question with his characteristic care. I believe, Master Bruce, that the distinction may be less important than we imagine. Mr. Wesker is consciously choosing to perform the role of a helpful, healing person. Day after day, month after month, he makes that choice. At what point does the performance become the person? But doesn't that suggest that all personality is performance? That we're all just acting? Perhaps, Alfred replied with a sly smile. But if so, then choosing to act with kindness, courage, and integrity becomes even more meaningful, not less. The fact that you choose to perform the role of protector rather than having protection forced upon you by circumstances makes your heroism more authentic, not more artificial. Bruce Wayne sat in contemplative silence, watching as dawnlight filtered through the conservatory's windows and illuminated the careful arrangements of plants and flowers that Alfred maintained with such devoted attention. Each element in the space served a purpose, contributed to the overall harmony, yet remained distinctly itself. The question, he said finally, isn't whether we're performing. The question is whether we're choosing performances that serve something greater than ourselves. Precisely, Alfred agreed, and Mr. Wesker, for the first time in his adult life, has chosen to perform service rather than control, healing rather than harm. Whether that makes him authentic or simply a more ethical performer, well, perhaps that's a distinction that matters more to philosophers than to the people his work is helping. Different voices, different roles, different performances, but all serving the same fundamental purpose of bringing light to darkness, hope to despair, justice to a world that often seemed beyond redemption. The show, indeed, would always go on. The only question was who would choose the script. And so our tale of Gotham comes to an end. Let the gentle night embrace you as you drift toward peaceful dreams, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the Dark Knight watches over his city. If you're not asleep yet, we will now play the ambience of Gotham City at night to help you fall asleep. And if you were just listening to our tales, we will see you next time. Good night and sleep well.